Good morning. We'd like to welcome Stuart Borgman from Palo Alto Networks to discuss cloud security and the changes in the managed service market. This was a hot topic at our Cloud Networking Summit just a few weeks ago, so we reached out to Stuart to see if he'd spend a little bit more time with us delving into some of the topics and issues that he raised during the summit. So welcome, Stuart.
Good morning, Gail.
Could you just start out by introducing yourself? And I think most of our audience knows Palo Alto Networks, but maybe a little bit less your relationship with the service provider community. So if you could spend just a few minutes on yourself and Palo Alto.
Yeah, sure. About 5 years ago, Palo Alto Networks started on a journey of working out how do we engage better with the service providers at a global level. Specifically, my role is to be able to engage with our service providers in the region, in the EMEA region, predominantly the largest service providers. They have some specific challenges. Clearly, they're moving and changing in a changing marketplace, and security is becoming more and more important for them. So my objective was to build a team with the right skill sets to be able to engage with those service providers and work with them on their transition to building more and more security services. We've seen a big investment in the service providers in terms of building out security services over recent years. And as a result, we want to be able to engage with them and provide the skills that we believe is necessary for us to help them build these new services. So a lot of that is around working with them to build out managed services. And clearly, there's different aspects of that. It's around building enterprise services, but also we want to help them in their infrastructure as well. And one of the interesting trends at the moment is 5G, and I think that's going to touch both their residential retail market, but also it's going to have a big impact on the enterprise market as well for security.
Great, yeah. So there's a lot of topics that we could start out with, but I think I want to go back to kind of the three key trends that you mentioned at the start of your Cloud Networking Summit, and they mirrored very much the some of the trends that I brought up, which was one, cloud adoption is obviously increasing for applications, for everything that a technical company does. But that adoption is not uniform. And as you look across Europe, different countries are in different places in that adoption. Remote working was already a very key trend. It was already influencing people to look at their security architectures in a different way. And then COVID hit. So now remote networking is the top trend of 2020. And then finally, of course, the emergence of SD-WAN and other techniques in the network to aid digital transformation. So you spent most of your speech going over that, but if you could expand just briefly on those three trends and how you think that affects the managed service plans of the service providers.
Yes, those three trends are clearly critical to the marketplace at the moment. I think different reports will tell you different adoption levels around cloud, and I certainly agree. I think each different region has their own particular regulatory sovereignty type issues around it. But generally, I think the trend we're seeing is a huge shift and move to the cloud. And I think there's different organizations have different skill sets to be able to enable their transition to the cloud. The large organizations, they have the ability to go and build out their cloud infrastructure. And also they probably have the ability to be able to secure that as well. If you look at the large organizations, they have cyber SOCs, they have CISOs. So whilst they're building their cloud infrastructure, at the same time, they are able to figure out what the security challenges are as well. However, I believe there is a large swathe, and if you look at probably what the service provider is addressing, probably 80% of their customers that they're addressing with networking and that transition to the cloud, they probably haven't got those CISOs. They haven't got the cyber SOCs. So the challenges they're facing is to say, okay, I want to move to the cloud. We know the power of AWS. We know the ability for them to be able to move into GCP, Azure, and all these other different services. We know that they want to use those different commercial models, but at the same time, they don't really understand the security challenges. And that's not being derogatory, but they may not have the skills. And therefore, one of the things I believe is taking place is that service providers are now in a position where they can be just talking to their customers, helping that transition to the cloud. A lot of these customers are buying directly from those cloud providers on a pay-as-you-go type model, but they probably want to be able to take security services and the networking requirements around it and use that for the service provider. So I think the trends are highly interlinked. Clearly, the other aspect you talked about was the remote working as well. And we are seeing this trend. I've worked home from 25 years, so whether COVID is really going to be a true indicator of future trend, I don't know. I think everyone's worked across multiple seasons. It's much easier to work at home in the summer it is the winter, and we see this life becoming much more integrated. So whether we see the accelerated growth of remote working, I don't know, but certainly remote working will continue to be a strong trend. And I put some numbers down in the number of users. I think 43% was one of the numbers we saw from one of the analysts in terms of the adoption of remote working. And clearly the service provider is ideally positioned to do that as well. So I think those are key trends, but generally the overarching trend is digital transformation. How are these organizations moving from the current state into a digital state, which enables them to be much more agile moving forward? And again, I believe the service provider has the skills and capabilities and the market opportunity to really benefit from that. And I believe security and networking are going to be tightly blended to be able to achieve it.
Yeah, talking about digital transformation, Palo Alto invested recently in GenX, which is one of the leading SD-WAN solutions. How do you view GenX in particular and SD-WAN in general in terms of the overall architecture? Because SD-WAN is more focused obviously on buildings than on remote workers, although it can be applied in a few cases to the home environment. But if you could just expand a little bit about what Palo Alto's intentions are with GenX and how it plays a role in the overall security architecture.
Yeah, sure. I think prior to the GenX acquisition, we had launched our Prisma Access service, which is really around deploying security in the cloud. Previous to Prisma Access, we had two consumption models. We had the hardware-based consumption model, typically being taken by enterprises, putting it onto their premise, into their branch offices. We had the virtualization model, which enabled our customers to deploy it within either their own private cloud or even in the public cloud. But what we're recognizing with this digital transformation, that a lot more of the services were moving closer to the cloud. So they needed to be able to secure it. So Prisma Access was the third consumption model that we introduced, which is really allowing our next generation firewall technology to be deployed in the cloud and to be able to help secure some of this cloud transition. So that was, and we saw that was being well received by the marketplace. And that's been a really important part of our portfolio over the last couple of years since that was introduced. As part of that as well, we partnered with SD-WAN vendors. We saw the fact that as this cloud transformation took place, the branch offices, headquarters, etc., wanted to be able to communicate into the cloud, but needed to have some level of application delivery. So we started to partner in that market space. But what was clear is our customers were looking from a single solution from Palo Alto Networks. They wanted for us to deliver the security, but also to have that connectivity model. And I believe GenX provided a perfect complement to what we were trying to build out. I think GenX really resonated with us as a company because it had a few aspects which we thought were unique in the marketplace. The first one is very much application driven. When we look at the performance of the applications, we actually look at the application. We're not looking at the jitter or the latency or the IP performance layer. We're actually looking at the application layer. So therefore, we can determine the best and optimal path for the application. And that really links into our next generation firewall strategy, which has all been about securing applications. So there was close synergies between next generation firewall and the GenX approach to doing SD-WAN. The second and most important, the second aspect, which was really exciting for us, was the fact it was cloud enabled. It was cloud managed. We had cloud management on it, which really simplified the model, enabled it easier for our customers to be able to deploy the services, and really linked into the whole DevOps model, enabling us to build an integrated cloud-based architecture that included both our Prisma Access solution as well as our GenX cloud-based management. That was really interesting for us to bring together. And of course, I think up before our acquisition, the Gartner started to publish their SASE approach, which was really around this convergence of wide area network and cloud-based security. And I think that really for us was bringing together Prisma Access and GenX really started to add to our overall strategy. Now, I believe that SASE goes beyond that. It goes beyond WAN. It goes beyond cloud-based security. It goes much more into the cloud as well. So I think there's more aspects to it, which I believe as well that we have a portfolio that can deliver against it. But it was a really important part of our overall strategy to acquire GenX. The one thing I'll say is that we still have those partnerships, broader partnerships with SD-WAN. It's an important part of our partner model. We've always partnered out there, and we want to continue to partner. So it gives our customers a flexibility. If they have a SD-WAN preference, then we can work with them or use GenX. But I think we see some real strength and value in the overall GenX solution integrated with our Prisma Access platform.
Okay, thanks. You mentioned early on that you thought the service providers have the skills to help the mid-tier market, and I think to a large extent that's true. But I must say, one of, even within our own organization, when we started 5 years ago looking at SD-WAN, our base are former service provider network engineers, guys focused on migration of large enterprise networks, in the networking area, including often network security, but really focused on the network. And we had a challenge at first to get our networking guys to focus on the application, focus on the cloud. And so we went through a whole skilling up program that at first met a little bit of resistance, but then, people got on board, and they think very differently now than they did, probably 3 years ago. And it even went so far as we have this course called Consulting Skills for technical people in the pre-sales and post-sales, because we believe as you get closer to the application, you get closer to business processes, and just the whole sale and support environment changes in the way people have to behave. What's been your experience in terms of both your own team and also what you see in the service providers? Or is it an easy transition, or is there more work to be done?
It's a really good question, and something that I've been grappling with over the last 5 years. I personally come from a networking background. Previous vendor I worked with had a security and a networking strategy, but coming over to Palo Networks, it was really interesting because I got immersed deeply into the cybersecurity world, which is different from the pure just network security world. It's looking at the application level and all those challenges around it. And it suddenly realized that the amount of that I had to go and educate myself around, and I'm still trying to get up to speed. So finding the skills out there that have that networking and cybersecurity experience it's a unicorn. Really, really difficult to go and find. I'm proud of the team that I've built over at Palo Networks in terms of the skill set I've brought in, and I've looked for those networking and security skills. Found some of them; they do exist. But you have to look elsewhere as well. And, one of the things I always look for as I recruit into my team is people that know at least one of them and have some experience in the other. But also I look for a sense of curiosity. And I think that's this world we're moving into. And the cybersecurity world is continuously changing. So the skills that you want to go and pull into are those that really are interested, they're fascinated by it. And one of the things that I've experienced as well is if you give them the tools to go and build those skills, the lab environment, those with the curiosity will go and learn really, really quickly. So I think we have to go on a continuous learning process. We have to try to find the individuals that want to go on on that journey. And if you find them, then I think they can be skilled up. And the experience that you have with Cavell and your type of organisation will play an important part in that whole education process. But I remember reflecting back, I was talking to a CTO of a cloud provider about 5 years ago, and he was very much into the DevOps environment, very different skills. We talk about networking, but the skills are very different. I said, how do you recruit people? He said to me, across my road, I've got a university. And as people walk out with their degrees, I bring them in, welcome them in, and I build the skills up and I put them into my organization. Yeah. And they are the skills we have. And it's a changing world. And, I've got a beard and a bit grayer now. And, I find it harder now to keep up to speed. But I think this wave of new experience that's coming through is going to be critical to our industry moving forward. And I believe the service providers, they still are attractive to go and work for. They've got huge reputations. They have the ability to bring that skill set in and use the wider industry to train them up. And they've got the size and scale to be able to do that. And so I think they're perfectly positioned to use existing experience, but also to skill up and bring in new skills and capabilities to go and be successful in the marketplace.
I think it's going to be a huge effort across the board. But we completely agree with your friend that going to the university is a good way. We have our kind of training internship centers in Coimbra, Portugal, because there's a big university there, and we bring computer scientists out of school and train them on networking, and it's a very good mix of skills. And
yes, well, you look at the graduates today; they're writing scripting from a young age. So
exactly.
it's second nature for them. So that's a skill set. We're trying to train people to be scripting. That's hard, but if they've been brought up with it, it's like reading and writing. That becomes a natural skill, and I think that's going to be really important. And then adding the cybersecurity and the networking skills on top would be,
I think the challenge for them is getting them, in our mind, or at least in our work, is getting them up to speed quickly on the networking and security side. Because they come out, as you say, digitally native. They know how to script, and they know how to program, and they understand the cloud.
And I think the other thing as well, which just on that, I've been working with networking guys for a long time. It's the real experience comes from the hands-on experience. Those that have been burnt by BGP and burnt by some of these protocols as well. That is such a learning experience, and to get an exposure is really, really important.
Yeah. No, it's going to be an interesting area, and I think the vendors, the consultants, and the service providers have to work together to create these skills, because, as you say, the industry is moving fast, and it takes time to create this skill set.
It does.
So, just along those lines, I know you have a lot of data that you're collecting in Palo Alto. I suppose that Palo Alto, like everybody else, views data and data science now as also one of those key areas. I'm not as familiar as I should be where you guys are providing, where you're using machine learning, but I would assume, given the vast amount of data that you collect, it's an important part of your strategy. Could you spend maybe a few minutes on that side?
Yeah, sure. Obviously, security is moving forward. It's changing. The threat landscape is changing, and the bad actors are getting more and more exposure to high compute environments. So it's a definite cat and mouse game, and we have to keep up with them. So I think the industry's realized that the only true way to really address the changing threat landscape is to be able to use machine learning, artificial intelligence. These are going to be critical aspects of it, because we talked about the skills before. It's not just about the skills, it's the volume of skills as well. What we need to do is to be able to use the compute to be able to help us identify the needle in the haystack, or the needle in the needle stack. How do we find that? And the best way to use that is to empower the capabilities of compute, use cloud-based machine learning, and we're doing a lot of that. So within our Cortex product line, we We have our XDR platform, which is there to be able to take volumes of data, our customer data, and continuously analyze using machine learning, artificial intelligence, to start to look for these threats, to be able to pull together vast arrays of data and identify where there is a bad actor. And the reality is, in security, it's about stopping that bad actor, and the sophisticated attacks are complex. The kill chain goes through various different aspects of that. And all we have to do is be successful at one of those points in that chain. So if we can start to use machine learning to identify that a bad actor may have compromised the device, then he's trying to move to another device, and this device is communicating to the device that it doesn't normally talk to. If you can use machine learning or artificial intelligence to be able to identify those type of attack approaches, then you can stop those attacks in mid-flight. And that's really important, and that's an area that we're investing heavily in. We believe it's a real strength of our organization, and I think this goes on to the SASE approach. It needs to be beyond just networking and security. It needs to take us into cloud security as well, to be able to use the cloud to help protect us as much as use the cloud to protect the applications that sit inside it. So it's an important part of our strategy.
Great. Well, I think, this has been great conversation. Maybe we could just round it off. If you have any thought, looking back at this last year, it's been a busy year. It's been a tumultuous year, obviously, a very difficult year for a lot of our clients and the industry. Do you have any, learnings or case studies that you took out of this year that you're particularly focused on?
I think there was one exciting one for us, which, as we acquired GenX, we started to look at some of their case studies, and there was one particular one that stood out. There was a large fast food, casual dining restaurant over in North America, which we use, and they had a large number of branch sites of restaurants that they needed to both be secure and have the right connectivity. So we used and worked with them on GenX. And the challenge is how do you roll out that number of devices over a very short period of time? But the power of the cloud management, the power of automation, the power of DevOps was really what we used. And over a period of 8 months, we were able to deploy a 29,000 site customer environment at a rapid rate. So we were doing some in the region of about 362 sites per week, which is huge, and that's not easy to go and do. I've worked in the service provider environment before, and the complexity of rolling out a site is difficult. But if you can use cloud management to have that level and speed of deployment, then all of a sudden you have customer satisfaction. You've got faster time to revenue, so both the service provider and the customer become happy. So I think that's a real indicator of the power of automation, the power of DevOps, and the power of cloud-based management. And I think it shows how exciting the acquisition of GenX was for us as an organization.
Great. Well, that's certainly a high note to end it on. I'd like to thank you again for chatting with us this morning.
Yeah, thanks, Gail. Really pleased you could invite me. Thanks.
Okay, bye-bye.